The concept of hellhounds is a widely common belief across many cultures and mythologies around the world. These ominous canines are often depicted with black fur, menacing red eyes, and are far more massive than your average dog. The one I would like to focus on today is truly the most famous one, and it's probably the first creature to come to mind when you think of hellhounds, which is Cerberus from Greek and Roman mythology. This guard dog of the underworld is highly recognized by its signature depiction as a three-headed dog. While this is the most widely accepted version, it is not the most accurate. Cerberus being a dog is really only a portion of what he truly is. This makes sense when you look deep into his origins and his ancestry. I find it disappointing that the real version is not as well known or has been properly represented in any art or media, at least until now. So join me on my creative process on how I went about making Cerberus, and is what I feel to be a more accurate adaptation, and to know more about the meaning and the truth behind this legendary guardian of the underworld. Along with some wire, I can create the armature. Once I get the general pose and frame that I like, I will bulk out the body with more tinfoil. Now I can apply the clay and start sculpting. To understand Cerberus, we must first look into his family tree. He was the child of Typhon, also known as the father of all monsters. Being so powerful and terrifying, even the Olympian gods feared him. Described as to be a giant with the upper body of a man, 2 long snake legs, 100 or more serpent or sometimes dragon heads that grew from his shoulders, a massive set of wings, and a menacing glare from his eyes that burned like bright hellfire. His wife was Echidna, a half-woman and half-snake monster, rightfully known as the mother of all monsters. Knowing that, we can now go back to our main focus of Cerberus. Knowing that both parents had a good amount of serpentine-type characteristics, this will make Cerberus being part serpent a big part of his character. It's disappointing that most of the standard depictions only acknowledge the three-headed dog aspect, since being part snake is a huge part of his genealogy. At most, the snake is only represented by his tail in certain instances. I wish to change that in my own version of Cerberus. For the amount of heads that Cerberus actually had is kinda confusing, depending on the source you wish to follow. Depictions of this range from having 1 to as many as 100 heads. One of the oldest accounts can be found in Hesiod's Theogony, stating Cerberus to have 50 heads. Future authors would make sense of this by keeping the three-headed dog aspect, and the rest is made up of snakes or heads of other beasts of all sorts. Now I tend to agree with the latter, with keeping the three-headed dog aspect, and the other heads are made up of snakes. So back to the sculpture, I'm adding the final fur texture detail, shown for one of these heads. I will make the other 2 heads off camera since it will be the same exact process. The first head is now baked, along with the other 2 heads. I enjoy giving each head its own personality and expression, and much like other multi-headed monsters, their personalities would differ and often have one main head as the leader and commander, another one as the reckless and unhinged one of the group, and in this for the third one, he's simply the more carefree and derpy one of the group. The body now is looking quite small in comparison, so bulking out with more foil before I go to clay. Putting the main body on hold for now, so that I can begin making all the snake heads I plan on incorporating. Using up my last bit of copper wire and filling in the rest with aluminum wire. switching things up by using this pale doll Cosclay to make the snake heads, just for some variation in visuals. I had this clay for a while, so it's a bit crumbly at the moment. Kneading it in small handfuls will soften it up, which I would then roll into long thin tubes and cut to size, inserting my pre-cut wires to act as connectors, adding a little slit to make the snake's mouth. Since I'm creating multiples of these, I'm trying to keep them as small as possible, in as much detail as I can. With the help of my sculpting tool, I can quickly add a nice scale texture. Some lines for the belly detail, and now we have a pretty decent looking snake. Now comes the part that I dread the most, which will be to repeat this process close to 50 more times. Oh joy. I've implied in the past that I really despise repetitive tasks, so while I haven't enjoyed this part of the process much, remembering my goals and as to why I started this project in the first place is what is most important to keep me going. Now that this is out of the way, I can go back to finishing Cerberus. Considering how big I made the heads, I plan on bulking up the body to be more muscular and in line with his overall silhouette. Starting with the back, by figuring out my placement for all of these snakes. So let me tell you more about Cerberus. Despite being a well-known character in Greek mythology, Cerberus had only been a part of two major stories. The first being the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. These two were lovers, and tragedy struck Eurydice when she was killed by a satyr who was trying to have his way with her. The heartbroken Orpheus journeyed to the underworld to try and convince Hades to bring Eurydice back to the living. Lo and behold, he sees Cerberus blocking his path. Orpheus, being a musician, decided to serenade Cerberus, lulling him to sleep, allowing Orpheus to sneak past him. It's like what they say, the trick to any beast is to know how to calm him. The other and more well-known story featuring Cerberus was the myth of the labors of Heracles. Essentially, he had to atone for his sins for killing his wife and children, due to an induced madness he had, brought about by Hera, who despised him since birth. For his punishment, this led to him serving under King Eurystheus for 10 to 12 years. It was during this time he had to carry out these grueling, seemingly impossible tasks, which the king called labors. It was the 12th and final labor that Heracles had to capture Cerberus and bring him back to King Eurystheus. So even though Cerberus was merely a plot device in a story all about Heracles, it is without a doubt that Cerberus was an intimidating monster that no mortal or undead being would dare mess with. Cerberus had other siblings that were just as notorious in their own right, such as the Hydra, a multi-headed serpentine monster that resides in Lake Lerna. The Chimera, a creature commonly depicted with the upper half of a lion, the hind legs of a goat with the goat's head protruding from its back, that also has the ability to breathe fire, and a tail that ends with a snake's head. Then there is Orthrus, the least and well-known out of the group, and is often what I call the forgotten child. This is because he shares many similarities to Cerberus, being also a multi-headed dog, usually depicted with two heads, and also had a snake for a tail as well. He was also a guardian that watched over cattle of a giant named Geryon. Mentions of Orthrus was rare, and any bit of info we do have about him is often shrouded in mystery. It's unfortunate that these reasons alone are often why he is cursed to live in his brother's shadow, and it is seen as a lesser version of Cerberus. Back to the sculpting, the body is fleshed out and more muscular. I really exaggerated the proportions of the upper arms and shoulder muscles. Visually, this made more sense with the amount of heads I'm incorporating. Now I'm adding all the long, shaggy fur to finish up his overall appeal. Much of what Cerberus looked like and his role in mythology is known. The origins of his name and three heads, however, often vary depending on the source material. One idea is that Cerberus' name derived from the Greek word Kerberos, meaning flesh devouring, while the three heads often symbolize human concepts or religious themes. One example of this is that the three heads represents human conflict of nature, its causes, and casualty. Another example of this is that the three heads represented different stages of life: infant, youth, and old age. Much of these ideas came about during the medieval period, where Christianity played a major role in everything, hence the symbolism of the number 3. Cerberus has remained a very popular character over the years. He has been featured in many other forms of art and media. One of my favorite examples of this is Cerberus' inclusion in the book Dante's Inferno. In this allegory, Cerberus reigns over the third layer of hell, representing the sin gluttony and devouring the tortured souls that are trapped here. Another form of media to feature Cerberus is his inclusion in demonology. The Ars Goetia, a famous grimoire on the study of magic and how to summon 72 high-ranking demons. The 24th demon mentioned in this book goes by the name Naberius. The demon Naberius and Cerberus are one and the same, since interpretations of the name Cerberus is very close to Naberus. Naberius is described as appearing in the form of either a raven or a three-headed dog. He is considered the most valiant Marquis of Hell, commanding 19 legions of demons under him. When he is summoned, he has the ability to restore lost dignities and honor, has the ability to make men cunning in all arts, science, and rhetoric, despite speaking with a very hoarse voice. As you can see with the sculpting, I'm finishing up the heads by adding in the teeth that I have pre-made beforehand, as well as fashioning a tongue for this particular head. This other one I will add a tongue later on. Then it's adding the rest of the fur textures to match with the body. And finally, the sculpting is complete. Just wanted to take a moment to show this part off. Pretty much the classic look of Cerberus. Constructing this with so many different additional parts was very challenging. I think it was worth it though. With everything now accounted for, it's time now to bring this hellhound to life with some color. Everything will get a solid base coat of black, using acrylic paints that have been slightly watered down. A little trick I have for this part is leaving a tiny ring around the holes unpainted, where the snake heads are going to be inserted. Just so it'll be easier for me when putting it all together. I always viewed Cerberus to be a mix of multiple animals, the dog being the main aspect, representing their devoted loyalty to its owner, Hades in this case, as well as being a protector and guardian, since this is viewed as a universal trait among dogs in general. The snake aspect is associated with the earth, acting as both a guardian and messenger to the world above and below. Their unusual and mysterious nature is what associates them to darkness. The venom they possess represents their dual nature to be both a healer and destroyer, associating them even further with things like magic, medicine, and wisdom. A third animal I will also connect Cerberus with is a lion, known for possessing great strength and being skilled hunters with their claws and fangs. Their long manes give off a sense of regalness and intimidating presence, making them respectable leaders and rulers. These combination of traits alone is what I think best represents Cerberus as a whole. For a subtle detail, I'm applying a brown wash all over, so that there's more dimension and depth to this piece, as well as strategically adding hues of red all over the face and mouth, giving him a nice bloody effect, since it has been said that Cerberus' face was always covered in the blood and guts of his victims. I think it pairs nicely with his burning eyes, continuously flash sparks, like that of a blacksmith's forge. For this last part, I originally thought about giving all the snakes the same paint job, but in hindsight that would actually be very boring, at least to me. So I've settled on the crazy idea of doing 3 separate colored snakes. 4 if you count the tail, but we'll get to that later. I knew I wanted to do green. It's not only my favorite color, but also a color that is commonly associated with snakes, with the addition of spots creating more interest and appeal. Then going in with my standard highlights. So I'm subduing the colors with a brown wash to better match with Cerberus, repeating the same painting process with my second and third color choice. This multicolored snake option I decided on was definitely the better choice. If I had kept it to doing just only a green color, with how I arranged all the snakes to be on Cerberus's back, he would have ended up looking like a very frightening chia pet. Is that a thing that's still around and people nowadays remember? Anywho, this whole process of creating Cerberus has been a long time in the making. So for my final thoughts, I would like to say that Cerberus is monstrous, but not inherently evil, much like his master Hades as well. Cerberus was a loyal guardian and watcher, also being the only surviving descendant. All his other siblings met their demise and were portrayed as typical monsters, but not Cerberus. He could be vicious when need be, but otherwise was non-threatening. Last thing to do is to paint the snake tail. I was inspired by the color pattern of the red-bellied black snake. In certain angles in the light, the scales appear to be this cool grayish blue color. I could be wrong about this and looking at a different picture, but either way, it looks cool and I'm going with it. Adding yellow to the eyes. This isn't accurate either, but I wanted the eyes to be more visible against the dark color palette. Everything is now painted. I can finally assemble all this off camera. I'll spare you the hours of frustration I had doing this. We can instead get on to the final look. So what do you think of my take on Cerberus? Was there anything that you were surprised to learn about him? Let me know down in the comments below. If you like this and would like to help support me as an independent artist, check me out on Buy Me a Coffee, linked in the description box below. Otherwise, simply liking and sharing this video around is greatly appreciated as well. Consider subscribing to follow along on all of my future projects to come. Thank you as always for watching. Remember to stay creative, and I will see you in the next one.